Welcome to DTC Wine Workshop's introductory webinar featuring Ken Majer.
What I want to do is just acknowledge that those folks on the call clearly know a lot about DTC. And so this first screen where it says DTC Fundamentals, you know about all these things. But I just want to briefly remind you that there are many aspects to direct-to-consumer, wine club partnerships, outreach, tasting room, website, social media. But it's not that any one of these is what DTC is all about. It's all about all of these things being integrated into what I would refer to as the DTC culture. Now, on the next slide, you can see that it's not a series of programs. What it is, it's a mindset. It's getting everybody in the organization to believe and talk in the same way 24/7 about your philosophy and what drives how your people behave as representatives of the winery. If you look at the next slide, culture can best be defined as it's the way we do things around here. It's all the behaviors that we have that people can observe. And so what you want to do is be sure that your people are relating to your customers, to each other, to your vendors, suppliers, and how they impact everyone who comes in contact with your winery. And in that sense, your DTC culture on the next slide is your brand. Culture is your brand. It's part of your brand and an essential component of your marketing strategy. Stories about how your workforce engages your customers will create your legacy. So this is about culture as a brand, as pulling all of DTC together so that it sends a message to the people that you interacting with. So on the next slide, the fundamentals. It's about culture, the way we do things around here. It's about how you employees provide accurate product information, how they behave in a heartfelt and welcoming way. Basically, you build your reputation based upon how you people behave every day on the job. And when you do it properly, as you'll see in just a moment, the culture will align your workforce, it'll enhance your brand, and build your reputation. That's kind of what we're talking about today. Now, the secret to all of this, in the work that I do with all kinds of companies, wineries included, of course, is that the core values of the organization, the core values of your team, form the foundation for your culture. Your values determine who you are. And more than that, I want you to consider for just a moment that this goes way beyond any individual organization. Think of organizations or teams or companies that really work well together. On this slide, you can see the Blue Angels. I'm particularly fond of the Blue Angels because I wrote a book about the values of Blue Angel. His name is Lieutenant Commander Scott Bair. He's retired now, but he flew number 5, the lead solo of the Blues. And I got to know him, and we wrote a book about his values and how they impacted his life. And it's really quite an inspiring book for young people. But in any case, the Blue Angels, they're flying here in San Francisco in another week or two. The Blue Angels are arguably the best flight demonstration team in the world. And they have a set of values that drive them. Trust, respect, accountability, integrity, and commitment. Everything they do as a team, their culture, their conduct, their rules, their policies, how they interact with each other, how they interact with the public, it's all based on these 5 core values. And I believe one of these is probably more important than all the others. You can probably guess which one it is. Trust. This is that famous scene where they have this, in the middle of the event, they have these 2 opposing planes coming at each other at about 1,300 miles an hour. And when they get to the precise point, they call it the point on the runway or over the water, wherever it is that they're supposed to do this maneuver, they make a little adjustment on their stick, probably an inch or so, and they fly past each other, and this is what everybody sees on the ground, and we all get our hearts out of our throats wondering just how dangerous this is. Well, it's very dangerous. I asked Yogi Bear, who's the Lieutenant Commander Scott Bair's call sign was Yogi. I said, Yogi, how far apart are you when you do this maneuver? And he said, about 25 feet. I said, well, what's the wingspan on an F-18 Hornet? He said, 38 feet. So the fact of the matter is that they don't make this precise move at this precise moment while they're flying over the exact point that they're supposed to do it, they of course could crash. And by the way, this is very dangerous stuff. They've lost 26 pilots in the last 52 years. So about every other year, they lose a Blue Angel pilot. That's how important it is to have a value of trust that you know the other guy is going to do exactly what you need him to do at a precise moment. Culture is a competitive asset. When you think about organizations that have strong cultures, they outperform the rest. When I first started doing this work years ago, people used to roll their eyes, oh, culture and values, that's all the soft stuff. What are we going to do? Sit around and sing Kumbaya and hug trees? Well, hugging trees and singing Kumbaya is okay. But the fact of the matter is, it's a bottom line proposition. We just talked about the Blue Angels. How about Southwest Airlines? They are probably and arguably the most successful commercial aviator in the world by any metric you want to use: on-time arrivals, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, etc. Southwest has a series of values that drive them, including the value of fun. If you want to write down the name of a book, it's called Nuts by Freiberg and Freiberg. It describes how if you go to get an interview with Southwest Airlines because you want to work there, you've got to tell a joke. You've got to show a sense of humor. Fun is a big part of what Southwest Airlines does. We've all experienced some of those fun times on their planes. Nordstrom, and for those of you who just saw Nordstrom come up on your screen, you probably thought customer service. I know sometimes people say shoes, but customer service is what Nordstrom is known for. And I've got stories, and many people have stories, legendary stories, about how people have been treated extremely well with Nordstrom. Some of these stories may not even be true. This is what I said before, but the legacy of the organization is based on the stories people hear. The lady who brought a tire in the Nordstrom and asked for her money back, they gave her her money back, and the guy turned to his colleague and said, we don't even sell tires here. That is an urban legend. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I don't think it matters. What matters is the stories based upon the value, in this particular case, customer service. The stories based upon the values in your organization are what going to lead to your legacy. Ben & Jerry's ice cream, we all know about Chunky Monkey and Cherry Garcia, but the fact is when they sold out to Unilever, they then just opened up demonstration stores and helped take people who were on the street without a job and showed them how to retail and clean them up and send them out to the community so they could get work. Fact is that giving back to the community is what Ben & Jerry's is all about. And the other ones, Starbucks, Harley Davidson, these are all values-driven corporations that outperform everybody else. So this is not about singing Kumbaya and having a nice time and pretty words on the wall. It's about your bottom line. So corporate culture, it's the way we do things around here. And we're talking about the DTC culture. Now the reason this is so important, Michael Hammer and Jim Champy wrote a book called Reengineering the Corporation back in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a big fad going on throughout the business community about how process was important, because process is the way people on the outside see your company. In other words, not silos like marketing and sales and manufacturing and other silos in the organization, but rather to somebody on the outside, to a customer, you see across all of those, and that's what business process reengineering was all about. These were the guys who impacted the business community throughout America for sure, and probably overseas as well, where they said process is the most important thing, except that when process runs up against culture, culture always wins. Because culture is about the people. No matter how good your processes are, no matter how good your strategic planning is, if your people don't do it, it's just not going to work. Peter Drucker said the same thing in a different way. He said, culture eats strategy for lunch. Culture is the most important driving factor, in my belief, that you can have to make your company successful. And to talk about the bottom line effort, Jeff Bezos, when Amazon bought Zappos, they said, okay, here's the price, but here's another $40 million because we want you to maintain your culture so we can learn from your culture. Zappos culture, you all know, is very customer-oriented, and they're very famous for how they treat their customers and how those customers come back over and over and over again. So culture is a business proposition. Patrick Lencioni, if you ever get a chance to listen to him on YouTube or see him in person, is a magnificent speaker. And he claims that most organizations today have a lot of smart people, a lot of expertise and knowledge, enough to be successful. What they lack is organizational health. Now we're talking about culture. What does it mean to have a healthy culture? Minimum politics, minimum confusion, high morale, low productivity, low turnover, and clear expectations for what you expect your people to do on the job every day. So values, this is the 30,000 foot level here. Core values describe who we are. I didn't make this up, by the way. It was Aristotle who said, I am what I repeatedly do. But what you do, what your actions reflect your personhood or your culture. An honest person does honest things. A person of integrity acts with integrity in a way that people can trust what they do. So your core values of an organization are the foundation that answer the question, who we are. Once you know who you are, in other words, you've established your core values, then you can say, here's the way we do things around here. These values drive the behaviors in the organization. Well, that's what culture is all about. Only then can you say, where are we going? Mission, vision, strategic objectives, and then finally, strategic action plans. How are we going to get there? Most organizations start at number 3 or number 4. They say, we're going to go off-site, take our best people, and we're going to have an off-site meeting, and we're going to write a strategic plan. Well, or maybe we're going to go to our vision and mission first. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't know who you are, and if you don't know how you do things in your culture, you may have the wrong people sitting in the wrong seats in your bus. Thanks to Jim Collins for that reference. You need to have the right people believing in the same things. That's the value set, and pulling their oars in the same direction in the boat so that you are all pulling together, and that's the culture. Then, when you know who you are and the way you do things, then you can say, where are we going? How are we going to get there? If you try to say how are we going to get someplace before you establish these first areas of culture, you may have the wrong people. And you may have people who resist in a lot of ways. And we know that people resist actively, passive-aggressively, in lots of different ways in an organization. So that's the picture of the background about how you go about making culture an important aspect of the way you do business. Chappellet makes spectacular wine, and those of you who read Robert Parker about a month or two ago, their Pritchard Hill Cabernet got a 99 plus. It's just unbelievable. They make extraordinary wines. They're just really great. Great people. Love the Chappellet family. I had the opportunity to work with them and build a culture, and here's how we did it. And this is the way you can do it in any organization. First of all, select your core values. Important point here, everybody in the organization needs to be involved in this process. You can't push a set of values down from the top or anywhere else. You have to have people involved and engaged if they're going to buy into it. Second step is you have to define them. Integrity is often a value that most companies like, but integrity for a software company might mean that we keep our software licenses up to date. Or it might be that for our doors and windows manufacturing company that we treat our tools with respect. So you define the values for your organization, and then the key is to identify the behaviors that you expect people to do. If integrity is a value, what do you expect your salespeople to do? As Zappos, they expect their salespeople to tell customers where they can find a product that Zappos doesn't have. Those are specific behaviors based upon the values that have been defined by the organization. Then you embed the behaviors into the processes of the company. What does it mean to have fun in the organization at Southwest Airlines when it comes to the customer service counter? What does it mean to have collaboration when you have a sales force? Or what does it mean if persistence is one of your values? What does that mean for your telemarketing group or your outbound efforts in outreach? So embedding the behaviors into the organization's processes is one of the keys to success. And then finally, rolling out and sustaining this over time. That's the hardest part. People resist change. You want to change your culture, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time, but once you get it, it's going to be very much more profitable for you. However, if you don't keep the pressure on to sustain the new culture, people will go back to the way they love doing things or that they're used to doing things. They go back to their comfort zone. So at Chappellet, we did that 5-step process. We came up with these values: excellence, respect, integrity, communication, creativity, and harmony, And then Eric, E-R-I-C-C-H, was the logo that was created, and Eric became part of the legacy and the way people talk about the values at Chappellet. Is that Eric-like? That wasn't very Eric-like. Do you live these values? Then you're living Eric. And Eric became a real important part of everything that Chappellet does. This is a rollout of one of the values in the boulders in the middle of their vineyard. And you can see that the winner of this particular value award gets to park anywhere he or she wants to on the property, and that's usually in the CEO's slot. And that carafe is a 5-liter Riedel carafe that gets filled with M&Ms, so people can buy and say, congratulations, hey, can I have some M&Ms? It's just a part of the way we rolled it out. This was a picture of people. There were 5 of these, I think they're called Django games. Structural integrity. Integrity was the rollout, so we had structural integrity as a game that everybody played as we talked about what we expect people to do to live the value of integrity. And of course, this young man, is a fellow in the cellar, won that particular award. You see the M&Ms filled in the carafe with the values written on each of the Eric values written on each of the M&Ms. So it's a celebration, and we did this one a month over a 6-month period.
You touched on some very interesting points, and could you elaborate a little bit more on each of the 5 steps that you've outlined to build a values-driven culture?
I'm getting a lot of interference right now. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. That's better. I just turned my volume down.
Okay, no problem. So hopefully, does this sound better for you now?
That's fine.
Okay, so if you could elaborate a little bit more on each of the 5 steps that you've outlined to build a value-driven culture, I'd like to learn more about that process.
Sure. What's really important when you're going through culture change is to try and build a culture based upon a set of core values, is that you involve everybody in the organization. It doesn't matter how big the organization is. If it's a small enough organization, you can have all hands meetings. If it's a larger organization, you can have small focus groups that meet and then get everybody involved. The important thing is that you can't push values on somebody. You need to engage them if you want to get the buy-in. Mm-hmm. And so it could be through monkey survey or survey monkey, or it could be through other ways, but give everybody the opportunity to be involved in the development of the values. Values are personal. I happen to be a dog person, for example, and so when I do my seminars on this topic, I frequently show dogs, tell some dog stories, and then I ask people this is the storytelling part. I ask people what some of my values are, and they come up with values that are related to people who like dogs. Loyalty, sentimentality, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So values in an organization, I use a very powerful question that is a lot of fun, and that question is, what do you love to do when you're not working? Then you drill down and ask some other questions, such as, do you do it with others? Do you do it by yourself? How do you feel when you're doing that? And out of this conversation, in a matter of minutes, you can get to who it is the person really is inside. And you can infer and then affirm with the person and validate the fact that this sounds like that this is a value of yours. Is that important? And when you do that with everybody in the organization, and you generate a whole bunch of values, then you get people to determine which of those they want to have, cull it down to the core values for the organization. Mm-hmm. And that's a way of giving everybody the opportunity and let them feel part of what's going on. So that's a real important part of what we do. The defining, I already talked about how you define the values for the organization, because, as I said before, integrity for a software company might be different than integrity for a winery. Mm-hmm. And it can be defined to meet the needs of the special company that you have. Mm-hmm. And then the big and most important part of all is translating them into behaviors. If honesty is going to be a value of ours for our company, what does it mean in terms of what our salespeople do every day? What does it mean in terms of what our executive management does every day? And oh, by the way, if the executive management doesn't live the values, then the values will not be embedded in the company. Everybody watches the leadership. You know, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. So people in leadership roles have to be especially vigilant about living the values the way they expect everybody in the organization to live them.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, keeping the pressure on. People always want to go back to their old ways of doing things because it's comfortable. So if you want people to do new things in new ways, you got to keep the pressure on. You got to be public about it. You got to reward people publicly for doing the right thing, and you've got to have private conversations with people who don't want to cooperate and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the key points about that 5-step process.
Okay, excellent. So for wineries looking to put a value-driven culture in place, how long would that typically take to put that together?
Well, people don't like change. They resist in a variety of ways, either directly or indirectly, and inadvertently. They don't necessarily want to be difficult or resistant, but most people are. And so it takes time to change behavior. And so I tell my clients that usually it would take probably about 6 months of fairly consistent work with the constant reminders of things to do and the reward and recognition program to support it, etc. So I would, you could probably do it less if you had a smaller company and everybody was really into it and really understood what they wanted to do. It could take less, but in a fairly, average size company, 50, 60 people, 3, 4, 5, 6 months is not unusual.
Okay, good to know. And then a couple more questions. I'm going to turn it over to the audience, but what are the keys for building a healthy culture?
Well, the keys are to manage the change, mm-hmm. Recognize how people resist and how you want to get people to get on board and be like first responders, get there and get the people in the organization who are well known or really admired and get them to be the people who are sort of your out front folks, your pulling guards, if you will. And so getting everybody involved and then making sure that you understand that organizations take time to change and they go through periods of different reactions in the organization. So it's really a change management kind of approach that you need to keep in mind.